the Story Grows, I'm Brian Patton. Today we welcome Tim Montana to the podcast. Tim will release Savage on July 12th. Tim talks about his childhood in Montana, what led him to leave LA and head to Nashville, the bar that led him back to Montana, embracing his rock side, and more. Thanks much for listening to this episode of As the Story Grows. If you aren't already subscribed on your podcast platform of choice, I would appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button. You can find links in our show notes or at asthestorygrows.com to our Discord server, our mailing list, and our Patreon page. If you think someone might enjoy this episode or this podcast in general, I would love it if you shared an episode with them. Word of mouth is still the best way to grow anything. Enjoy getting to know Tim Montana.
It's a devil you know and a devil you don't. One's in your head and one's in your soul. All my life's been the same damn thing. Still chasing something I can't see. It's a devil you know.
Currently out in Montana.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah, it's nice. It's lovely.
Big Hole River.
Yeah, it's way nicer than what's outside me right now.
Where are you at?
I'm in DC.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, so it's nice. This is home, so I love it. But like,
my brother lives there, so I go there quite a bit.
Yeah, nice. That's awesome. That's awesome. What was growing up like for you, man?
It was cool, man. I grew up here in Montana, off the grid, way up in the mountains in a single wide trailer house, and got a guitar when I was 6, and music kind of became a friend at a very young age. I didn't have a lot of other toys or TVs or video games, and kind of sucked when I was a kid, but now I'm grateful for it. So
yeah. Was the guitar forced upon you, or did you want one at that age?
I was banging on pots and pans and thought I was Axl Rose when I was like 4 or 5, so They went ahead and got me an instrument, and I loved it.
They went with guitars instead of drums, which is probably wise.
Thank God, right?
Everybody needs a drummer, right? Like guitarists are dime a dozen. People need drummers all the time.
They're a special breed, though.
Yeah. What? I mean, you mentioned Axl Rose, but like, have you just always been into music from a young age? And
yeah, I remember finding we had a pawn shop in Montana, and my mom would bring home like tapes and CDs, and I just kind of go through them. And she was funny because she was very religious and would have had a heart attack if she knew about half the tapes and CDs that I found in there. Like, she brought me home Tool Undertow one day when I was like 8.
Oh, man.
And she's like, I don't know what this is, but we can't sell it, so you can have it. And I was like,
Nice.
So I was like forced to go to church every Sunday. Meanwhile, my mom's giving me like Tool and Guns N' Roses, Use Your Illusion 2, and not even knowing the content of the records.
That's funny. That's funny. I grew up in a very religious setting, and yeah, it wasn't quite like that. It was more like you had to dub your cassette tape and just write something else on top of it so nobody knew what it was in your headphones.
Yeah, I just went to the Vatican. I just got back from Rome. That was actually pretty cool.
Oh, wow.
See Ground Zero. I grew up very Catholic. I'm not really proud. I'm still spiritual, but I don't really practice anymore.
Yeah.
But to see the Vatican, I mean, that's pretty wild sight.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. At what point did you start writing your own music?
Pretty young. I just had a hard time finishing songs, and I still do today. I'm just very ADD, and I use it to my advantage. Like, I like it. I bounce around and I get all kinds of projects going. And, but yeah, I was probably making up words when I was 7 or 8 years old. And then definitely writing lyrics and finishing songs by the time I was like 7th or 8th grade. And then into high school, I was, recording demos when I was like 14 or 15 years old. So,
yeah. Was there any sort of music scene in any like arm's throw of you that you were participating in?
I couldn't really, there wasn't much. There was like a very small music scene in Butte, Montana. And it's funny because the guys all worked at the record store and shop. There was one record store called On Cue. And if I was very good boy, my mom would let me go hang out there, and I'd just drive these guys nuts. And they were probably 15 years older than me, right?
Yeah.
And just sitting there because they played bass and they were so cool to me. And I'd go in there and get all this stuff and CDs and what I could afford. I didn't have a lot of money at the time, but it's pretty cool because recently on the Stain tour, one of those guys, my buddy Rob McLean, came out and he's like, "This is pretty cool, dude. That little kid that used to drive me nuts and On Cue is now on tour with Stain, and I'm coming backstage to see you."
Yeah. That's awesome. Was it like the struggle to find a music scene that led you to first leave Montana?
Yeah, I got into music school in Los Angeles, so I got into Musicians Institute. And I was either going to go military or music, and I had recruiters at my house like crazy when I was 17 because I was off-grid hunter, fisherman, just constantly like building barbed wire fences and jackleg fences. And I was like, I'm fat and lazy now, and I'm not that fat, right? But like when I was a kid, I was like lean, mean,
Yeah.
that liked grunge. And so I had recruiters, and then my mom was like, please, please, please sign up for music school. She didn't want me to go to the military, like any mom, right? And so I remember when I got accepted into Musicians Institute, she was like, "Oh, thank God, I prayed every night that you wouldn't go to the military." So I went to Musicians Institute in Hollywood, flunked out of that twice, went back and tried again, could not get through music theory or music reading. I hated it, but I liked the live playing workshops, and I liked the networking more than anything. And just meeting other musicians and jamming with them. And then one day some blind guitar player came in named Johnny Hyland, and I'd seen all of them at this point. I mean, Zach Wilde came to the school, and who's the guy? Steve Morse, and all these, even our guitar teachers were pretty famous. Ken Steiger did the movie Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg, and then the dude from Lynch Mob, George, forget his last name, George Lynch, I think.
Yeah, George Lynch, yeah.
So they were all like instructors there. So there's some pretty famous shredders that like went to school. But then one day I see a cardboard cutout of this pretty heavyset guy that's legally blind with a Telecaster and this cowboy hat. And I'm like, who's this guy? And I go to the live playing workshop and saw him play guitar. And I was like, I'd never seen a human being attack an instrument like that. And like effortlessly and no distortion. And I'm like, dude, this guy's faster than Eddie Van Halen and there's no distortion. Yeah. And he's one of those virtuosos. If you haven't looked him up, look him up. He's not like super well known, but in the guitar world of like freak show, like probably from another planet, like he's that guy. Yeah. And so I said, "Where do you live?" And he's like, "Nashville, Tennessee, buddy. Come on down." So I quit school right then and moved to Nashville. And still can't even play 0.00001% of what that dude can do. Yeah. Nashville.
Were you going to Nashville to try to like make it as a musician, or did you have like ideas of just like, I don't know, finding the right place or songwriting?
No, there's definitely music. Yeah, he told me to come down there. So he was going to produce my record. And I'd never done a record at that point. And it was funny because I was like in rock bands in LA. We didn't play out or anything. We were just talk rock bands. Everybody had a talk rock band. You'd rehearse the GIT and be like, "Dude, I'm going to sell out the whiskey." And you'd hear more people like, "Dude, I'm such a badass." And people would just talk rock and they would never perform. And it was the weirdest thing. And I even remember a buddy of mine, people would be like, "Dude, have you heard him play the bass? He's supposed to be the best." And then I talked to everybody and no one had ever heard him play. I'm like, "Oh, it's just talk rock." But anyway, so I went to Nashville and I was doing the rock stuff in LA and skateboarding, and I was like this rural kid, but everyone's like, "Dude, you're country as hell. You're from Montana." And everyone they didn't even call me Tim. They just called me Montana because I was this wild man this was my first experience having electricity. I mean, it was like quite a culture shock to go from Elk Park, Montana to Hollywood, California. So I was just fucking wild, right? Wild. Yeah. And fist fights and skateboards and partying all night long. And I tell people I got a PhD in partying in Hollywood. Then I met Johnny and he's like, "Dude, you're from Montana. Why don't you come like do some country rock shit, like guitar heavy country rock, talk about your upbringing?" And I'm like, sweet. So I moved to Nashville, did a record with him. And that's where I stayed for about 17 years. Was in Nashville, Tennessee, and then moved back to Montana last year, August, almost a year ago, and then had my first rock single hit top 5. So it's pretty interesting trip. I just kind of like went back and forth. Yeah. Did you find your lane in Nashville, like just playing with other people, or songwriting, producing, or just both? I was a bouncer. And then I worked my way to playing the backstage at a famous honky tonk. And I don't like singing covers. I don't even remember half my own songs. So I did that, and then got a publishing deal, songwriting. I just went and like co-wrote songs for a couple years until I got a contract publishing, and then got my first couple cuts. Kid Rock, Sweet Southern Sugar record. I wrote 2 singles on there. I wrote his country single with him and his rock single with him that were both top 40 songs. So those were my first real songs by an artist. Yeah. And then, Travis Tritt recorded one of my songs, and then Michael Ray. And so I had some stuff there going on. And but we never really got accepted in the country community because I was always too rock, and I loved heavy guitars. And even you look back at how I got to Nashville, because I saw this dude shred balls, and I'm like, I want to do that. Like, I want to shred. Yeah. So people are always like, when they're interviewing me, they're like, so what's it like to go from country to rock? And I'm like, they never let me in. So I was always the loud, obnoxious rock guy in Nashville. So finally rock brought me in, but Nashville, I was the obnoxious dude that played too loud. And so, so then we crossed over to like hard rock, which, I mean, like I said, I grew up ranching and listening to grunge.
Right. It's a natural progression there.
Yeah. I'm geographically country. Musically, I've always been a big rock guy. So,
yeah. Did that kind of influence the sound listening to like your older records that are on Spotify? There's definitely more of a country rock vibe than the heavy rock on this new record. Was that influencing you?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've always been a big ZZ Top, Charlie Daniels, Waylon Jennings. Like those dudes, like helped shape me. But I had like my biggest phase was Nirvana. Like I wore out Nirvana so much from age 14 to 17 that I have a hard time listening to it today. And not because I don't like it, but because I wore it out to the point where like my ears would bleed, right. When I was a kid. So now my daughter's going through a Nirvana phase, and I think it's awesome. She's learning all the songs up there, and I'm like, hey, I think I know every Nirvana song. I can at least remember how the riff starts. Yeah. So she plays the guitar, so I'm just like, all right, this is Come As You Are. This is Smells Like Teen Spirit. This is Lithium.
Nice. That's awesome. What led you back out to Montana?
I've been looking for an excuse to get out of Nashville for about 10 years. Yeah. And every summer I'd come up here, and I just missed it, man. And the state started blowing up during COVID because the Yellowstone TV stuff, and I knew that it was going to be unaffordable to move here soon, like Colorado and Aspen, Colorado. And I was like, man, I'm like missing out, and I just love being here so much. I'm a big hunter, fisherman, outdoorsman, and this bar came up for sale. And it wasn't even up for sale. I was just talking to the bar owner, and she said something. It's a historic lodge that's in Wise River, Montana. I'm wearing the hat right now. And I've hung out there. My uncle took me fishing there, and I always hang out there with my family when I was a kid. And through the years, I've just always come to the Wise River Club. And I love the Old West. And I've been in 3 Western movies. I love Western history. I love Western culture. I've written about it a lot. Native Americans. I'm just fascinated by the Old West. And so I was talking to a lady, and she's like, if you like it so much, why don't you buy it? And over my years in Nashville, I became very close friends with Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top. And so I called Billy, and I'm like, dude, like if it's something new and modern, Billy Gibbons is not into it. If it's something that has character and it's old and authentic and has, just like, if you ever go to Billy's houses, you'll never see a new fancy, like nice house. It's got to be unique as Billy is, right? Billy's a very unique character. Yeah. And so I just FaceTimed him from the bar, and he's like, buy it. I'll wire you a check. So we bought this lodge. It's got a bar, it's got a stage, it's got a restaurant, it's got 7 cabins. The hotel dates back to 1896, and it's a lot of work, but it's just cool having like a little music venue. My little piece of Montana up here. So and people are just packing it out because press got out that me and Billy bought it, and every weekend when I'm here, I get on stage and perform. Yeah, just kind of do acoustic stuff, songwriters style that I kind of saw in Nashville, like a Bluebird does. And we've just really we're creating and evolving quickly into this really cool thing that we're building. So
that's awesome. With the shifting of the music industry, did that make it easier to just like, you can be in Montana and still have a vibrant music career where you don't have to feel like plugged into the Nashville scene? Or do you just like, have you just built so much relational capital that it doesn't matter?
And it'd be hard pressed. I know a lot of country stars. I don't know many of them that like living there. They're miserable there. Like they, and very few of them are from there. It makes more sense for people from Georgia. There's a lot of country stars from Georgia and close to Nashville that can, go see their families 3 or 4 hours away. But, even guys like Zach Brown, they don't live in Nashville. They're down in Georgia where they're from. And especially during COVID, I think when everybody started just kind of moving out, and then Nashville started this massive influx, and traffic there is insanity, and the scene is, it's a great, the songwriting scene's amazing, so I'll give it that. But the city has gotten crazy, and I never felt at home in a big city anyway. And the scene just kind of got wore out. I'm like, if I see another flat-billed dude with a gold chain around his neck, I'm gonna throw up. And so I was like, it's like the authentic guys are hard to find, and they're especially hard to find in Nashville. And I miss that true grit, those real McCoys, and there's not a lot of them there anymore. So get out, time to bail.
Yeah.
But I got a lot from that city. I'm not going to shit on it too much. It's not my favorite place to be now, and I still have my house there. But I learned a lot, and especially the songwriting community is second to none. The musician level of talent there, no place in the world has people that play their instruments that well. That is not debatable whatsoever. How people shred there, drums, guitar, bass, everything is wild. You can talk shit about the commercial country music scene as much as you want. It is kind of boring and a glass of lukewarm tap water. But the musicianship is wild. And those dudes, I don't think they like playing 3 chords on records all day. They like to shred.
Yeah.
But they got to pay bills.
Yeah. There's an interview with Garth Brooks I heard years ago where he was like, every waiter at every restaurant is a better guitar player and musician than he is. But it's you kind of get lucky and end up where you are mostly out of luck and not because of talent all the time.
Oh, yeah. Did you go to Guitar Center there? They will just
do circles around you.
Guitar Center in the country, you're like, oh, that's obnoxious. You go to Nashville and some little old lady will just shred balls. And you're like, what is happening?
Down to my last cigarette, but it still ain't hit me yet. Maybe I'm just scared to death, trying to drive right past the signs. Can't pretend that my blood ain't cold. There's no fire, but I smell smoke. Pounding like a heartbeat, building up inside.
Let's talk about Savage, this new solo record. Was it just the desire to make hard rock that led you to try your hand at this?
Yeah, if you go back through my catalog and go back to Tim Montana and the Shrednecks with the skull on the cover, that shit was heavy. We went hard. So I'd always go back and forth, but I never found a lane. And I was trying to bring a tinge of country into grunge. And then I was grunge country. And so I always musically experimented. And then American Thread was my last independent record I did. And that had the Mostly Stone song. And that's kind of a rock song. It's piano driven, but it's if I put that out today, I'd probably add heavier guitars and it'd probably work at rock radio.
Yeah.
But it's, again, everyone's like, oh, this big transition. I'm like, I didn't really make that big of a transition. I just turned my amp up to where I wanted it to be and got to scream a little bit. But when we moved to Montana, I turned in Devil no one told me to go make a hard rock song. We just did it. Me and my producer, Michael Wilshire, were just let's go heavy with this, whatever. And they're not playing me on country radio. They're probably never going to play me on country radio. So let's lean into this sound a little bit. And we had 1 song out of 4 that was really heavy. And then my label flipped out. And they're like, can you do more of these? And I'm like, yeah, no problem. We can do that shit all day. So we went and wrote Savage, and really quick too. The songwriting process with rock is so much faster for me because with when I'd write some of these country songwrites, it's just conforming to the rules, and it's the rules are that big, and rock is very wide. And so I'm like, oh, I can talk about any topic I want to. I can cuss, I can raise hell, I can scream, and in the country commercial format, there are very tight rules into what you can and can't sing about.
Yeah.
So it was just very natural. So
yeah, you lean more into your intuition and what feels right than trying to, cookie cut or something.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about Savage and that title. What led you to name the record after that song?
just like coming out with this really heavy sound. And I don't know if you've listened to the rest of the album, but
I
like,
have, yeah.
we dug in like on Get You Some, like that's some heavy shit.
Mm-hmm.
And so just listening to that transition and having that song and knowing that was one of our favorite songs on the record, we're like, Savage is a cool title. And then we came to do the photo shoot, and we didn't really do the timing intentionally, but we shot in Montana in the middle of winter, and it was really fucking savage up here when it's 10 below zero. And I got in the river back behind me in some of those photos, and it was freezing and snowing, and everybody's like, dude, this photo shoot's savage. Everything about this record is savage. And I'm like, this record is savage. Like, no questions asked.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you felt like the chains were off and you could write about whatever. Were there things you had held on to or ideas you had always wanted to write about that you now focused onto this record lyrically?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we touched into some like Shut Me Out. It's got some really dark lyrics that kind of talk about my childhood a little bit more. And it might sound like a relationship song, but I was kind of, I had a stepdad that was really shitty to me and didn't want me around. And so those things just kind of flow out of me, and I can do it in this genre where I couldn't in the other one. I touched on it a little bit in some past records, but with this one, it was easy. And that was one of those songs my producer just sent me the track, and I just spit those lyrics out while I was cleaning my shed one day and just started typing them out on my phone and sent it back. And he's like, holy shit, dude, that was so fast. Yeah. And so I could get a lot of this stuff off my chest. And nice. I just forgot what I was like. It's like, what were you talking about?
It's all good. Album's out July 12th. What's the rest of this year look like? I mean, hit, radio charts, and is your plan to tour?
Yeah, Savage is at 15 right now, so that's pretty cool to have another one going up there. Yeah. And we start the tour with Bush, Jerry Cantrell, and Candlebox July 26th. I got Miles Kennedy start January and February. I'm really stoked because that's direct support. It'll just be us and Miles. And then after I got that tour, I realized he's a Spokane guy. And I'm like, there is something about people from this side of the country, Montana, Idaho, Washington. Like, I'm sure the music had to make sense, but he was probably like, oh, sweet, he's from the Northwest.
Yeah, right.
There's definitely a vibe of people that, that's another reason why I moved back to Montana, because there's that just different vibe, and I love it. Nothing against the South, but it just wasn't for me. But yeah, so we got the Miles Kennedy tour, the Bush, Cantrell, Candlebox tour, and just, a heavy year. And I think we're probably going to announce another tour. I'm not sure, fingers crossed. But I'm sure we're going to be working our butts off. So, and between that, I'll be swamping out the bar down the road.